We're at MedTech Conference live in Toronto. We have Will with Rivanna. He is the CEO, founder, and tell us a little bit about yourself. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, great to be here. This is a great meeting. Enjoy it every year. So Will Mauldin, Rivanna Medical. So we're developers of world first imaging technology based on medical ultrasound, trying to solve very specific clinical indications with that technology, and perhaps we'll get into that a little bit here.
Awesome. And we got Randy here, my co-host.
Welcome. Let's get into
it. Sure.
So tell us the company, what do you work on, what kind of your backstory and history, where are you at, what problems are you solving in healthcare?
Okay, so biomedical engineering by training, got a PhD at the University of Virginia. So the company name Rivanna is the river that goes around town, kind of by Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's place, and we gave it a local name. Wanted to do something in the ultrasound space and kind of found a couple gaps in healthcare where ultrasound's not being used, but it could be if you really customized it for that particular purpose and that particular indication. So we're looking at epidural anesthesia. So ultrasound's being used all over the place by anesthesiologists to put needles everywhere except for epidurals, and there's some reasons for that. And then same thing at the bedside for fracture assessment. We're actually working with the federal government, with BARDA, on a sizable contract to develop this technology to make it so that you can diagnose a fracture right at the bedside and not have to transport the patient back and forth to radiology and go through x-ray. So it's been a short 14 years at this. We do have a product on the market, but right now with the company, we're kind of at a big inflection point to get these next products to market.
I just feel like this is awesome, Randy. We had some really great interviews earlier, and it's all about these micro niches, really adding greater value. Our discussion, that was sort of where those pockets are, and it sounds like you've discovered that.
Well, yeah, from a business strategy standpoint, right? You're not going to compete with, from our standpoint, GE, Philips, Siemens, and those guys. And the way you can compete, however, or at least avoid the competition, is making these trade-offs, these business strategy trade-offs to be hyper-focused, because those guys are trying to be more generic. Think about point-of-care ultrasound. You got to image the heart. You got to guide a needle, image the lungs, do all these different things with one system. That kind of puts you a little bit in a box and some constraints around what your technology can look like. The nice thing that we have is we can just hyper-specialize on the indication, make these trade-offs that they wouldn't make to be much better in serving this particular need. So I think that's probably a similar story to what you're seeing with some of the other companies too.
Cool. So tell us more about that. Like, what is your science that differentiates you? Your medical science, I guess.
Okay, so I think it starts out with how do we image bone with ultrasound, with medical ultrasound? You're used to thinking about X-ray based imaging modalities for bone imaging, mainly fracture detection, like CT scans, image the spine, something like this, but not really ultrasound. Ultrasound's traditionally been for blood vessels, kind of fetal imaging, cardiac imaging. Soft tissue structures is where it's excelled. And so at the core, that's where Rivanna is really innovated, is around ultrasound, both new kind of probe systems, new kind of beamforming, and then on the software side to make high quality, and sometimes in 3D, sometimes 2D, images of these bone surfaces to either guide a procedure like an epidural with a needle, maybe an orthopedic surgery with this technology, or make a diagnosis.
So this is like the next segue. I really hitting home with the patient. Just could you dive deep on really what that's doing and what that means with patient care?
Okay. Well, I think the epidural one is an easy one to talk about. I mean, a lot of people either, you yourself or a spouse or a family member, you kind of know someone who's probably had a difficult epidural experience in that labor and delivery. It's common where there's complications there. And with everything that goes on in labor and delivery, bringing a new child into the world, the epidural can be one of the most anxiety-provoking aspects of that, because the woman's facing the other way. Got a really big needle. We're going to actually put a catheter down your spine. The needle's going to come pretty close to your spinal cord, and let's hope that the doctor is feeling good and is really good at this.
All on a high anxiety day to start with.
Yeah, and it's a very skill kind of experience driven thing for the provider right now. Because it's all blind based on palpation. So from the patient perspective, I know when we bring our system into the clinic and into that room, the patients love it because they get some comfort out of knowing that there's some technology there, that the clinician is adopting the latest technology for them to make sure that this is going to be safe and to make sure that they can administer it correctly.
Just on that, what would a clinician, what would an anesthesiologist in an OB ward, say, like, I'm going to use a new machine and it gives me a better picture so I know more where I'm sticking the needle. Last year I didn't.
Well, they leave out that last part. But they say, there's been some advancements in imaging technology, just like when we guide our, any other blocks with needles. Now we're using ultrasound. So we've got a highly specialized ultrasound system that's going to allow me to see your epidural space and see the needle to make sure that we get it placed quickly and accurately. And so I think they can come in the room and say that instead of like, what they maybe were able to say before.
It sounds like you're making it easier for good people to do it really well, but you're also making it easier for a lot of people to be good at a very difficult thing.
There is a trend toward a little bit lower skill providers generally, just in general. And in this space, what you've got going on is the CRNAs are starting to do more and more epidurals and spinal. So
could you define the acronym for
it's called CRNA, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist. So these are not medical doctors. They do now have PhDs, and they have a nursing background, and they get specialized skills in the art of anesthesia. And depending on what state you're in, the laws are different in terms of whether they can practice autonomously. But it's kind of like a PA, physician assistant, or something like that, but specialized in anesthesia. So there is a move for that group to start doing these. And then also, if you go to any academic hospital, you've got mainly residents doing their very first epidurals and spinals. And so that's where we tend to see higher rates of complications because of that, and therefore a bigger impact on like technology to get them used to like mentally picturing the anatomy. If you have some imaging there, that can just speed up that learning curve for them.
I just love having you on as a founder. Tell us, like, can you go back? It's 14 some years. Where did you start?
Just overnight success. So started as a grad student, University of Virginia, and went to University of Virginia because the two ultrasound faculty had their own startups, and I saw that this was like an entrepreneurial environment. The Wallace H. Coulter Foundation had some funding there to help spin things out, translate them. So that's why I came there, and then I was able to take a class at Darden, which is the business school, and that's really what started Rivanna, is just trying to match like my skill set where I could maybe make an impact as an engineer, and then like a good business problem, which at the time was that epidural kind of problem. And I thought that was around the time where miniaturization of electronics, integrated circuits, handhelds were coming about. And so it was like, okay, can we make like some kind of handheld thing to address this this gap?
And then you just shared about BARDA, which can be doing anything and everything.
So a lot of people know, like, I got an NIH CIBR grant, or I got money from Stryker Ventures, or I got money from a venture capital firm. What is BARDA? And could you explain to people what's different? Because we're actually hearing from a lot of companies saying I'm getting BARDA funding.
So BARDA is also it's within Department of Health and Human Services, so kind of like parallel to FDA and NIH, where you get your SBIRs. But the role of BARDA is really to fund medical countermeasure technologies. So whenever I mention BARDA, people's heads usually go straight to like military DoD, but that's not what that is. So it can be similar technology because you're thinking about like mass casualty and like preparedness and things like that we kind of associate with military, but it's really for domestic incidents. So here they always bring up like Boston Marathon bombing. What happens when something like that occurs? And you get all these patients rushing into the ED, a lot of them, in blast trauma, a lot of suspected broken bones. Right now, the EDs are not situated very well to handle that, in part because they've all got to go through this prolonged process to get to an x-ray, to get to a radiologist read, to communicate back to the ED doc, to then come back to the patient. And 80% of the time say you actually don't have a fracture. You didn't even need to come in, really, see primary care if it hurts in 2 weeks. So
BARDA is thinking about basically somewhat rare situations that all of a sudden happen in a huge volume, and how do we handle that volume?
Preparedness.
So they're more like a medical cousin of FEMA.
Yeah, to some extent. although, you know, you think about FEMA going out of the hospital, and this can be in the hospital. In fact, they really need and want these technologies to be integrated into standard practice, because, you know, you have something like that happen, and if the physicians have never used the technology, they're not going to start using it that day when the event happens.
And they're like NIH, like they write you a check for some scope of work, but they don't take a piece of your company.
It's non-dilutive in that way. So it's very nice. They tend to, from my experience and perspective, things are always changing. NIH can have like an omnibus, very broad mission, improve human health. BARDA tends to have their own kind of areas of interest. So they have their strategic priorities, and then they'll come to, you know, meetings like this. They're here and look at how the landscape may match up to their priorities, and they kind of handpick. At least in one area of funding, they can kind of handpick what they want to fund.
So you guys are doing AI stuff.
Yes.
And you're on 5 continents.
Yes.
So the interesting question here, because we're asking a lot of AI questions, is talk about doing AI and getting it approved on 5 continents.
Okay. Well, we haven't done that AI approvals yet. Okay. So we do have a commercial product. It doesn't have the neural network AI on it. And so that's been our experience kind of globally selling that. There are many different challenges there in terms of regulatory clearances and market access. You know, we talk about China or the new MDR in Europe. With AI, that's what we're currently integrating onto the epidural guidance product to automatically navigate the clinician so they don't have to read the image. So tell them left, right, up, down, this is how deep it's going to go. Or on the bone fracture system, kind of automatically perform the quality control. So an ED tech can just acquire the 3D image and not a physician, and then also to automatically diagnose the fracture. And so, you know, right now we're going through the necessary testing to get through FDA, and then we'll see how it goes with Europe and other countries.
To what extent can you kind of like, is there a, what's the overlap between them? Is there stuff you're doing now or you're planning to do for Europe that's different than the US?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, for a while, and when I started, Europe was thought to be an easier clearance than US with FDA. I think it was 2017-ish, MDR came online, and that's kind of flipped it. So now maybe FDA is a little bit easier. A lot of discussions here, still very regulatory focused, but I think more on reimbursement and that kind of roadblock to new technology adoption in the US. Europe now with MDR, very onerous, a lot more clinical evidence needed. So we're generating clinical evidence anyways. So that should be applicable to both US and Europe. There are some differences, but yeah, should be a lot of shared kind of things that we're generating in that Venn diagram. Certainly hope so.
Great. Anything else you're looking to get out of this?
The event,
conference.
The conference, anything else?
The conference. I love the reverse pitches. So right now, you know, the company, we've got a commercial product on the market, and we've got a maturing kind of technology portfolio. Got 2 new products coming to market soon in the next couple of years. So right now is a big inflection point for the business to look at partnering with strategics. To partner together, get through that reimbursement hurdle, and get the economics more favorable for these really big changes in standards of care that our technology represents, and then have some success commercially with that. So reverse pitches here are great. Like all the panels are really good here and meeting people.
Will, it's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The only disappointment is that it turns out that Old Dominion and University of Virginia are not football rivals. So I couldn't get a